All right. Welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. Today's white lightning is going to be 180 proof, at least from my side.
Uh, you got some annoying topics to talk about. Oh, and
Yeah.
I forgot to bring my tabs up for what I wanted to talk about. But the books all have something to do with it. Heath wanted to talk about babies, so I've got the selfish gene up.
Mhm.
And I wanted to talk about education and well, both education and babies go with the top book because I want to say this straight up front that the fact that all of these things are even an issue is a testament to how good we have it in in the Western world. The fact that these are arguments as opposed to just means of survival is already a feather in the hat of Western civilization, realistically.
Yeah, I was actually can't remember what sparked this thought, but I was kind of thinking along these lines and um over the weekend, and I thought, I remember what it was. It was the train of thought started at the station of student loans and student loan forgiveness. That's what it was. Um, there is something to mock the mocking phrase of first world problems. However, there is also something to first world problems. They're still problems,
Mhm.
right? The so on the one hand, you have to acknowledge, yeah, that's a problem. Yeah, that's a struggle for you, but how much of a struggle? That's the big thing is I think what gets lost in this idea of first world problems is that we have become such a soft society that any amount of struggle or resistance or difficulty is considered some kind of affront to your being. No, that's just life. No matter where you are, there is struggle and difficulty and obstacle. We do not live in a paradise. We do not live in a utopia. You cannot have a utopia. And every time humanity has tried to implement a utopia, we have instead gotten the exact opposite. We have gotten absolute horror and mayhem and mass death. So stop trying. Oh, I remember what it was. Actually, it was before the student loan stuff that I was hearing people talk about. Um, there's a nifty little mini series on Netflix called Fight World. Have you watched any of it yet?
Fight World? No.
Yeah. Eh, People have done a similar thing over the years. I've seen a number of them where you take you take some dude and you send him around to learn different fight styles. So it's the actor Frank Grillo, who's a big fight enthusiast and fan, and also trains in various uh, martial arts. And so he's going around to different parts of the world, talking to, interviewing various fighters, and he does a little bit of the training to see how it is. And I was watching uh, the Thailand episode, and you have kids from rural areas whose parents send them to these fight schools because this is how they get out of poverty. They go to these fight schools, and the trainers and promoters pay for them to go to school, and then they also get a percentage of the purse that they can send back home to their family. And a lot of people in the Western sensibility uh, are appalled by this and feel like these parents are selling their children. And they were very clear that no one is being sold here, and if you can't cut it, or if you lose the desire to or don't have the desire to, you go back home. But third world poverty that we have no notion of here in the US or in the West in general, it is something that will compel you to go to these kinds of extremes. And the one kid that they were following around, and they went to, they watched him train and they talked to his trainers, and then they went to a fight of his. He's a 17-year-old kid who's already had 200 bouts. What does that do to the body?
Depends. Well, it depends on how quickly he won, how
Yeah.
dominant he was, how much training time he had in between them, or if he was actually fighting to train.
Uh-huh.
Because then you can subtract a lot of sparring matches from that. But either way, it's still going to be a pretty good deal of damage.
Yeah, and so this was something I didn't know, is that because I knew about these training schools that kids and teenagers would go to. I didn't realize how very, very, very few of them continue to fight afterwards, because they've already had 200 or more bouts. So most Muay Thai fighters retire between ages 20 and 25.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd also like to see what the damage during a developmental age versus damage in your 20s is. Now we all know as you get older, the damage adds up quicker. But
Yeah.
if you started that damage earlier while your body's growing, I can see broken growth plates. I could see developmental issues, high stress environments during that time.
But on the flip side, because you're still in your developmental stages, is your body able to adapt more and better?
Yeah, that's what I would like to see, what the data is on that. And I doubt we have anybody tracking that.
And where that ties into today's discussion is our softness begins when we're kids, with parents who embrace the self-esteem movement, embrace participation trophies, and never wanted to let their child feel pain. Okay. And that's why I liked this documentary, this series, is just the name of it. Fight World. It's about fighting. Is everybody's fighting something. Everyone, whether you're a professional fighter or not, you have to struggle. You have to fight. That's life. They one of the things he did when he was in Thailand is he went out to these that are kind of sort of technically illegal, but nobody does anything about it, of fight clubs, of Muay Thai fight clubs. And they talked to some of these guys. I'm a sales manager. I'm a software engineer. I'm a whatever. And, most of them didn't have any actual training. They just watched videos on YouTube. I mean, some of them were watching videos as they were trying to learn how to wrap their hands. And then they just went out and they would have, like 3-round bouts just in the street in a group of people, because you need that affirmation, and you need that struggle to strengthen and solidify yourself, so that you then can go on to regular life, which is also a struggle.
Well, even in high school, I mean, we used to just spar and stuff in the backyard. But even before that, my brother's group of friends, who were all 2 years older, we just all get together and put on. We wear boxing gloves, and if we were in the street, it was strictly boxing. But if we were on the grass, anything goes. You could tackle somebody, you could punch them on the ground, no kicking. But yeah, it was. I mean, I was the little guy, so got a little bit scrappier in that process because my brother's a freaking ogre. But yeah, even in high school we did that, and it's just, especially for us boys, it's natural. If you don't have that group of friends, you're missing out. If you don't have at least one fake tooth by the time you're in your 20s, come on. I guess that's the redneck in me, but
Cletus, the slack-jawed yokel. And we
no, but let me tack onto that, because then we're going to get into the actual scientific development. There is remember when I brought up, we were talking about stress from socioeconomic status. Well, again, first world problems, you say that doesn't mean it's not a problem. Everything is relative to where you live.
Yeah.
And so if you're racking up student loan debt, you're basically signing yourself into serfdom if you don't get a job that pays very, 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 very well, because now you're paying out, say you got a master's degree, $1,500 a month in student loans. Well, how much are you making a month?
Right.
You know, 4, 5.
Yeah. And as we've continued to feed this this problem, it has created a negative feedback loop. So you now have a growing percentage of jobs that the minimum requirement is a master's degree, because we have created this giant glut of bachelor's degrees. And so employers need some way to differentiate candidates. And so it's okay, well, now you need a master's. So now you're adding to that debt. And because
Well,
we have
we've
such
created
a glut,
circular problem.
yeah.
All right.
And because we have such a glut, your starting salary is going to be way lower than you thought it was.
And how
way
many of
lower
those
than you were
jobs don't
sold on
need
that.
a degree? How many of those jobs would you get just as proficient at with just on the job training, or an associate's in on the job training? I always say this about my degree. I have a master's. Well, if you go into the research end, you at least, I'd say at least a bachelor's, but to actually train at a high level, to be that strength and conditioning coach, or work at a college, or even work with specialized clientele, 2 years tops. Anatomy, physiology, some basic psychology, and then a big group of classes, maybe two semesters split. So 1 year just the basics of anatomy, physiology, and psychology, and then another one where you're putting it together in like peak performance classes, taking the biomechanics and the physiology and learning how to put it into training. Sports medicine, how to evaluate gait analysis, useful tools where you're using that base knowledge. So 1 year of the base, 1 year of putting it together, and then a mentorship, internships, that kind of thing. If you got that, then you can be a super high level trainer, because you've got the witchcraft, you've put it together, and then you learn from somebody who watched you put it into action enough that you become proficient with it. That's it.
And we have created a system that is self-interested and self-sustaining. So you're not going to break up this negative feedback loop without strong outside pressure, because they're not going to do it to themselves. And that's the data you have and what you were going to look at. But before we jump into that, my last point on our kind of introduction here is that where this matters is we have created a group of youngsters that are developmentally, intellectually, and emotionally retarded. They are not at stages of development that even 10 years ago they would have been at their age. And now, and part of that is because they're so soft. Part of that is because, as we've mentioned before, when we were kids, if you got in a fight at school, you were taken before the teacher or the vice principal, and the first thing they asked is who started it. Okay. Not that long after we were out of school, it became zero tolerance. It didn't matter. So all violence is bad, period. Well, wait a minute. I was standing up for that kid who was being bullied, right? We were both in those kinds of scenarios as kids. That should matter, but oh no. All conflict, all altercation is bad. We are creating mental softness by feeding that physical softness. And then you take those kinds of people and you stick them into these systems of higher learning, where they are instead just meat popsicles ready to be indoctrinated.
Let me take it a step further, because back in the day you're talking about, it was the order of operations in the situation was bully bees bully, you stand up to bully, teacher sorts it out later, right? Now, when you see all the signs and everything around there, and you say, what happens when someone's being a bully? The answer is, go find a teacher. Go find an authority figure to take care of it for you. Fast forward 20 years later, now these people are in the workplace. Find an authority figure to fix it for you. Don't resolve your own problems. And so now, and add another layer to it, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy with mental illness and bullying. Back in our day, stand up to bully, let the teacher sort it out. Stand up to bully is an important part of the developmental process. Go find the authority figure and feel bad about being bullied is the new standard. Now we're actually perpetuating the idea that bullying causes the mental illness. No, it's the letting yourself be bullied that causes the mental illness. Now, again, this is aside from really special situations, like, you know, a 10-year-old being beaten up by an 18-year-old, or a mentally challenged individual being bullied by all the kids in the class, or something along those lines. But in the normal situation, just the slightly bigger kid picking on the littler kid, or whatever. Stand up to the bully is actually part of the behavioral therapy. You're not going to win, or you might not win, but at the same time, you're going to develop into a strong human being in the long run. Again, it's the order of operations has changed. And like you said, it's that protective nature. And we all want to. I want to say something to my son before he does something stupid. And I have to pick and choose. Is this going to be something that he won't recover from? Like, hey, I saw you not looking both ways before you cross the street. You better start doing that. Or, oh, if he keeps high wiring that ledge, he might fall off and get a bump or bruise. Okay, let him do that. Anything you want to add before we go into?
No, let's get into it. The specifics and the data of what we're talking about here.
Okay, that was kind of a big overview of all the things kind of leading up to the universities. But now we're going to go into the technical nuts and bolts of what's wrong with the university. Because student loans are going up in the same rate that obviously admissions are going up. Admissions and the price of going to school. It's a no-brainer. It has to happen that way. So what I wanted to go into was one of the nuts and bolts problems of all this. Why do admissions keep going up? We've got a little bit of bloat here. Since 2000, so over the last 15 years of this study, faculty has remained relatively level, and administrators have skyrocketed to the top, almost triple, where faculty just went up, what, about a third, a quarter, somewhere around there. So I was looking at different universities, and oops, I brought the wrong one. Hold on. This is across Texas, and this is administrative spending. That's the University of Texas. That's Texas A&M. And then these are all the other Texas universities that have public funding. Okay, I want you to kind of just keep that pie chart in your mind when I go through some of the individual universities, because then we're going to start seeing numbers. All right. Let's start with the University of Texas. Now, they didn't have you have to do a FOIA request for their actual spreadsheet breakdown of every individual thing.
Of course you do. Because why wouldn't you for a public university that is using my tax dollars, jackholes?
And for those that are saying there's a link right there for what you're just talking about, I'll point at it. That link actually doesn't work. So, so this is University of Texas. So this is their annual budget, roughly $3.6 billion. That's expenditures. Okay, they get 20% of it from tuition, state, county, federal support, grants, etc. But now let's go down to the spending. 51% of it is salaries and benefits, salaries and benefits. Okay, that's good. We want that to be a big chunk of it, right? Because that means they're spending money on good people. But let's go further down. 42% of it make up the university faculty. So instructors make up 42% of it.
Well,
So,
not only that, but that includes research and teaching assistants. So that's not even just professors.
So with the other 58%, is non-faculty administration. So if we do 51% of the 3.6 and then 48, which is or 58, oh man, I got to do this again. 3,600,000 times 0.51. So just to salaries is $1.83 billion times 58%, everything but faculty. $1.064 billion are going to non-educational administration. Bloat. Lots and lots of bloat. So I did look for some that I could find the actual breakdown of, and this is where that pie chart comes in, because now we're going to look at individual budgets, and those little slivers are the only ones that I could find the actual.
But before you go into that, let me rant on those pie charts for just a second. This is what I mean by it's a self-sustaining system that won't change itself.
Oh yeah, to change this, the administrators would have to make the decision,
exactly.
And the administrators would have to trim the fat, basically.
Higher education has so much government money in it, it has become a government bureaucracy, and government bureaucracies do not fix themselves. Instead, they tend to become a kind of money laundering system. Okay, and this is what I mean by that, practically speaking, is we are taking more and more and more public funds to pay ourselves more and more and hire our kind of people more and more. So we need more, administrators. We need more vice president of diversity and inclusion, etc., and so forth. And all of these people need to be PhDs, right? So these upper level administrators, you must have a PhD in some sort of gobbledygook. Okay, so that's just adding to the money laundering system. That's just feeding your own selves. Hey, you want one of these cushy jobs as an administrator? Then you need to be here for 6 to 10 years, giving us more and more money. And don't worry, it's not really your money, because you can get grants and subsidized loans to feed it. Here's a specific example. So there's a family friend of ours that I grew up with as kind of a surrogate uncle for when we were deployed, because this man served under my dad at a couple of different deployments, and so he was always around, and he was kind of one of the several surrogate uncles we had while we were overseas. And shortly after my dad retired, the corps that he was in returned the 1-star general status to its corps commander. And this friend of ours reached that status before he retired. Okay, so you have someone here who has a DVM, Doctor of Veterinary Medicine. He had graduated from Texas A&M. This is what made me think of this, because of your pie chart and all the money we're paying into this system. So he was a graduate of A&M. He had served in the Army for over 20 years. He retired as a 1-star general. He applied for the head of their veterinary college, keeping in mind that was basically his job when he retired, except even more expansive than the veterinary college, because he was in charge of tens of thousands of individuals, officers and enlisted, at his final post, which included veterinarians and thousands of vet techs, as well as all of the things that they do, that include way more than just clinic work. Okay, he was more than qualified for this post as the dean of the veterinary college at Texas A&M. He had no chance of getting it. Why? Because what he didn't have was a PhD. Why the hell did he need one? Well, because all the other PhDs say you need one. In any rational world, in any rational private sector world, no one else, no other candidate would have had a chance against him. But in the academic world, you don't have to live in the real world.
So next, I have where I got my master's from, University of Houston Clear Lake. And of the total budget, almost 5 million, so 10% goes towards VP finance, much more than the actual running of the place.
Wow.
Let's take another. Oops, what did I just do? I want to log in. Can't even remember my login. This is going to be important here, guys. It's not just picking on this.
That's a lot of numbers.
Yeah. Let me blow this up. What did I just highlight there? We got one specific admin office. Can you see that?
Yep.
Keep in mind, this is not a large school. Up until a couple of years ago, it was only a 2-year university. We've got $500,000 in one little department. And realistically, no one can even tell you what that department does in most of these colleges. And again, this is a small school. I went here because I kind of knew I could find the numbers I wanted. University of Houston, not Clear Lake. It's pretty much the same. The admin's a little higher and the equity inclusion's a little bit, actually a little bit lower, but that might be just because there's so much diversity at UH anyways, that they didn't feel like they needed to kowtow as much. Let's see. That's not the one I wanted. That's not the one I wanted. I must not have saved the one I wanted. I'm have to look for it, but I found a lovely article that was diversity studies, the new way to make 6 figures. And it was confirmed in part by doing the salary searches by places in Indeed, the other recruitment centers, and then looking at the actual individual VPs and deans of these universities and how much they make. University of Michigan he makes almost $500,000. Just the VP for diversity and inclusion. The one for UH Clear Lake was just north of 6 figures, like 106 or something along that range. 106, 107.
You know, that makes me think of something, because you say the University of Michigan one makes $500,000, and people love to complain about the several million that the football coach makes. Well, the football program makes money, and you're complaining about the several million that this head football coach makes for this, top tier D1 school, and you're completely ignoring all of the millions that are paid to these nonsense, useless admin offices.
Well, and just the simple fact that we actually know what the football coach does. He coaches the football team.
Yep. And keep in mind, we're focusing on these numbers because, you have them and we can show them that this isn't just a problem of universities. This has now filtered down to secondary education, that these same kinds of people are more and more being hired in school districts, that your local school district, I guarantee you has some sort of office for diversity, equity, and inclusion. They may not call it that, but they have one, and that person probably makes 6 figures. Persons probably make 6 figures.
I did not find that in our local one. In fact, their admin budget was very low compared to what I was looking up everywhere else.
That is refreshing, because nationally on the whole, you have a boom, and I've mentioned this, is you can find the worst offenders are in the places that have the worst schools, like New York City, Chicago, DC, and pretty much all of California.
Now, how does this affect the students? That's the main thing. Okay, so we see how it affects the universities. They're obviously paying more money. How does this affect the students? Now we need more volume. We need to recruit more students. And how do you do that? You make college easier, or excuse me, more accessible and easier. That's the only way to do it, because if you recruit a bunch of freshmen that drop out after the first year because it's not easy enough, then you did nothing. You probably broke even on the recruitment budget. So you need people to come and stay for that master's, stay for that PhD in diversity studies, stay for that PhD in, postmodern philosophy or something along those lines, so that they can write an ethnography and call themselves doctor at the end of it. So that's the scam. More students, keep them there. More students, keep them there. And at the end of the day, that ends up with more graduates with zero skills and lots of student loan debt. So that's the racket. That's the racket, and that's where it affects the students. So we're talking about education kind of in a long series. We'll break up maybe every third episode or so. We're starting from the top down. And the top is university bloat and the racket that has to support it. And the fact that the taxpayers are shouldering the load, basically.
And someone is going to be on the hook if, first of all, I don't know how Biden can say he's exploring ways to forgive all or some chunk of student loan. I'm sorry, I thought you were the president, not the king. How is this even remotely legal? But secondly, for all of you saying, yeah, great, they deserve it, I deserve it, whatever, somebody's going to have to pick up the tab there. You can't just magically wave a wand and make this stuff disappear. Somebody along the way is going to have to get paid that money, which means that inflation that you're saying sucks now. Well, when the Fed waves its magic wand and just magically makes, zeros and decimal points appear in the bank accounts of these large loan service providers, there you go. There's more money in the system, which is going to cause inflation, because that is definitionally inflation.
I said it, what was it, a week and a half ago we started this, or 2 weeks ago, that the university should be the one to pay and they need to start trimming the fat. I'd like to say I was in on the trend, or got before the trend, but I don't know when it started. But the Twitterverse is saying that same thing, and I'm like, damn it! I wish I was a louder voice. But yeah, that's at least we need some sort of action that makes them responsible for all future loans. They're the deed holder on all future loans, so they're responsible for the default, not the U.S. government.
Well, and that's one of the insidious things about this system, is that you can declare bankruptcy and your student loans don't go away. So the government's going to get well, hold on a second. If you were sold a bill of goods in the same way that if you overextend yourself with your business, you should be able to declare bankruptcy. That's going to have negative effects for you. It's not something you do lightly, but you declare bankruptcy, you liquidate your assets, your creditors get paid as you can, and then your slate is clean and you try and rebuild yourself. No, not if you have student loans. Government's going to get its.
Oh yeah, and they'll garnish your wages. They'll take away from your Social Security after you retire, everything. So it's, I don't know.
It is a mafia-like racket.
Yeah. Well, I don't blame them as much as I blame the universities, because it has to start with the bloat and the supporting of the bloat and encouraging. Now, I guess if you're talking from a federal level or state level on grants and student loans, is maybe you have more criteria. What is your major going to be? You must be making these grades, et cetera, et cetera. But other than that, I really blame the people who are encouraging it would be like blaming the government for credit card companies making it easy for someone to get a credit card and then looking for the bailout.
You know, that's it shows the incestuous relationship here, because every other time the government inserts itself into an industry, and education is an industry. It is something it is a commodity you pay for like anything else. They always insert massive amounts of regulations. If you're on food stamps, there are certain things you can and can't buy, and certain places you can and can't spend that. For crying out loud, I've ranted about the insurance industry, all levels of insurance, that the government heavily regulates that. What regulation is there on a university for this free money? And you kind of mentioned this last time, and I had this conversation when I was, a freshman with my aunt, when I went there to stay for the weekend and wash my laundry. Is she was talking about, when she was getting her degree, she had time for this and that and a part-time job and all this, and she was able to pay for most of it by herself. And I said, well, I've got this, this, and this. And she said, what? In talking with her hour requirements were something like half to 2/3 of what mine were. And that's a big part of it. You kind of ranted about this, about the gen ed requirements. That's a place where a lot of that bloat comes from. So that now most degrees aren't actually 4-year degrees. If you look at the hour requirements and what can legitimately be expected of a student to do semester to semester. So the 5-year degrees used to be engineering type things because they were very difficult and rigorous. Well, now those are starting to stretch into like 6-year degrees, and your basic, just run-of-the-mill bachelor's degree is probably going to take you 5, because there are so many hour requirements. That's just the university scamming this loan system, this loan and grant system, by saying, oh yeah, and you also have to pay for this and that. Well, I didn't have to a year ago. What do I have to pay for it now? Oh, well, because you have free money. I mean, because it's important.
There are some that would be seemingly non-major classes that I could see being part of a curriculum, such as like public speaking. That's useful no matter what you do.
It's the basic idea of a liberal arts degree is to create an at least somewhat well-rounded student beyond what your individual focus is. But it's gotten rather ridiculous when you have 30 to 40 hours of gen ed and you only have like 50 hours of major. And I was like, why do I need almost as much for my gen ed as I do for my major? That's going well beyond, a well-rounded graduate.
Well, and even if you're gonna fine tune it, you could specify it for school. Like, okay, so for a physiologist, for someone who could be presenting research or whatever, a speech class or a public speaking class would be useful. But did I really need to take drawing for non-art majors? I needed an art credit, but did I really need that for my major? Now, if my major was in the arts, maybe that's something useful, and it could be part of the streamline, and I may not need some of the others, to make high level math classes or something along those lines. So maybe it could be streamlined in the individual schools, but still cut that down to like 1/3 of what they do. Did I really need to take, what was that? What was that one we had together our freshman year? It was like a history of literature with that.
Oh gosh.
The old white guy that neither of us could stand.
I don't remember. Was that one of the honors classes?
Yeah. But either way, it was a random like early American literature, and he was kind of a jackass professor. But did either of us need that? No. I was what was my major at the time? Biochemistry was my major at the time. Did I need early American literature? Interesting. I could read it on my own and be well-rounded, but did I need to take a class? No.
especially when you're already getting exposed to some of that kind of stuff with your basic English and basic history that you're supposed to have to take. Why do you need both?
Mhm.
Well, we could rant about this forever, but I'm going to save my additional thoughts for next time, where I do have some thoughts on kind of steel manning the student loan forgiveness argument, as well as kind of my own solutions to go along with the university should pay for it
Mhm.
things. And so next time we'll have a little more than just old man rants at cloud.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, my summary of my position on that is I'm not exactly for and against it. I could see benefits on both sides because, and if I was going to go for it, my steel man of that is, okay, we created a problem as a society. Let's get past this problem. And then, but on the other side of it, there better be solutions to make sure it
Oh
doesn't
yeah.
happen again.
Yeah.
And that's where I go into the bloat, and that's where I go into we'll go into the importance of trade schools maybe next time, the importance of letting kids know that college isn't an end all be all for everything. And then we'll just keep working down towards from, to the high school, to the junior highs, to the grade schoolers, and go from there. So, but yeah,
All
we're
right.
beating a dead horse, I think, at this point.
Yep. All right, let's take a short break, and then I have annoying things to rant about myself.
All right.
All right, so I got prepped and ready this morning, and then I needed to take a break and calm my mind, because if I were to title this episode, it would be F you, I was right, I told you so, but without the self-censorship.
Is this the kid debate? Or
So I finally lost my temper, and so this has been simmering for over a week. I lost my temper with some friends in a group chat I'm in, and I just started ignoring it because I just don't have the patience for it anymore. And I have been trying to be more accommodating and convincing. I have ranted about the the old style of political debate being trying to score points and win, and I don't think that's very productive. On the other hand, I figure we're about a third of the way through Niemöller's poem right now, and I have no patience left for people who don't know what the F time it is. Okay.
Okay,
When
keep talking because I'm not following yet.
here's what I mean. When I say baby murder, it's not a meme and it's not hyperbole anymore. When I say groomer, it's not a meme, it's not a joke, it's not hyperbole anymore. That's why I was surprised and thrilled that you brought up the term when we were first talking about this several weeks ago, is because that's what I was thinking, what I was going to say. And I was going to say, I think this is grooming. How is it not? And before I could even pose the question to you, you brought up the term, because even to someone who's left leaning and for a long time was pretty apolitical, and still kind of is, I would say, apolitical, because you listen and read more philosophy than you do politics, and I tend to pay attention.
I just think it's all connected at this point. And realistically, it always was. And I was just again, my mistake. I was ignorant to that fact up until a few years ago.
So to me, they're linked, because it is a dehumanizing of people in general and children specifically. And this has long been a talking point of the pro-life side, that the pro-abortion side has not or will not discuss, which is, okay, well, if you're going to allow abortion, especially with little to no limits, then how are you not dehumanized? That's why the pro-life movement was wrapped up not just in abortion, but I don't know how many people even remember the euthanasia movement, which kind of sort of won, kind of didn't. It's much more prolific and in
I,
Europe
I've
than it
s-
is here.
yeah, I've seen hints that it might be coming up as the debate again.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, and for anyone who watched our debate and discussion on abortion, it it was seemingly agreeable, but that's because we agreed on the basic principles, which was that the basic principle of the abortion argument should be, when does human life begin and why? That's where what we both agreed on, and then we just had different definitions of that.
Yeah, we
In
had
fact,
different timelines on the range.
and in fact, since then, I don't necessarily agree with you, but it actually occurred to me there's already a logical and even a legal basis for your point, because we already have laws and regulations on the books about what you can do with a human who has lost brain activity. That
Mhm.
is the marker for, do we take this person off of life support machines? It is, a doctor will recommend it. The next of kin can, versus, just, I don't want to deal with that body anymore, unplug them. Well, hold on, there's still brain activity there. You can't just do that. But if there's no brain activity, you can do that. And that was your marker for when
Well,
a
specifically
fetus
cognitive
becomes human life.
brain
Right.
activity, not the lizard brain section of it, because
Mhm.
that develops first. But
So I'm gonna get in the Wayback Machine. And does anyone remember 2015? Oh, the halcyon days of 2015, when
when
everything was great.
we're in the throes of Colin Kaepernick, and
Yeah. Okay, so let me. Does anyone remember this? Planned Parenthood exec fetal body part subject of controversial video. So there's a couple reasons I used CNN here. One, because it's horribly biased. So it's not
in the
something that's
opposite
making
direction of your bias is
exactly.
what you mean by that. Yeah.
But also because I want to point out that bias as I remind you of this story. An anti-abortion group. Yeah, we're not biased here. So they went undercover. They made these recordings of Planned Parenthood officials and executives and doctors talking about selling fetal organs and body parts for profit. A clear violation of the law. This is against the law. There are laws on the books that are supposed to prevent this. Planned Parenthood's excuse was, no, we were just seeking reimbursement for our costs. These weren't for profit. It's directly contradicted by what is said in these videos. And yet, who was charged? The people who took the videos, not the people who were on video bragging about breaking the law
Were,
for money,
were they
doing
on a
things.
single? Were they in a single party record state, or I
Some of
guess
it was, some
California
of it,
would probably be a dual party record state.
yeah, some of it was a little fuzzy. But even in dual party consent states, there are exceptions for filming illegality or for whistleblower protections and these kinds of things. So, and even if they weren't protected under those things, you could still say, well, then why weren't they both charged? But there was never, to my knowledge, there was never even an investigation into Planned Parenthood and what this conduct was. Scroll down a little bit. Um, okay, the video, which is almost 3 hours long, and they have a link to it. You can go watch all 2 hours and 42 minutes and 22 seconds of it. The Center for Medical Progress, it's still on YouTube, surprisingly, was released Tuesday, along with a heavily edited 8-minute version. Okay. Well, obviously, it's heavily edited if they're going to give you an 8-minute version out of 2 hours and 42 minutes. You do that yourself, CNN, which has drawn more than 1 million views on YouTube, as opposed to about 40,000 for the full length footage. Hold on. You are ostensibly a news organization and you portray yourself as the middle of the road, just the news, as opposed to the left, avowedly left-leaning MSNBC and the supposedly right-leaning Fox News, you're supposedly middle of the road. So why aren't you telling your readers whether or not that matters? You're just throwing it out there to.
Well, I also see that they have a transcript.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about context, like, okay, the 8-minute took it out of context, pick your portion of the 8-minute video, control F the transcript, and then read before and after and see if it was edited to remove context. You can still be lazy and still find out the details.
Yeah. And this is, again, coming from an organization that still to this day says that Donald Trump praised neo-Nazis when he came out in his stupid little speech after the Charlottesville incident, where even the New York Times admitted the day after he wasn't praising the white supremacists. And if you just go 30 seconds before and after, you see the full context of what he was talking about. So, and this is why I'm using CNN, because this is what was done with that video. Is heavily edited, taken out of context. Okay, well, what was the context? How did the edits matter? Never mattered. Never mattered. And so it was ignored, dismissed, and there were no real consequences to it. Do you have any thoughts on that before I go on to the next one?
Other than, I mean, I can't stand all mainstream news media, but I mean, just keep going. I'm gonna have to take a broad brush approach to some of this because I don't know exactly what you're bringing up. I thought it was going to be on the Supreme Court today.
Yeah. No, because the court is a political organ. People like to pretend it's not. They say they're not, but they are. It's just more politics. I'm not as interested in the politics right now as in the principles of what the hell we're talking about here. Do you remember the name Kermit Gosnell? Did you ever hear that name? This is from 2013. So this was even before the Planned Parenthood videos. 58 horrific details from the Kermit Gosnell trial that you do not want to read. You can find pictures of it too. I didn't bring those up because let's not. Philadelphia abortionist Kermit Gosnell, 72, is now facing trial and is charged with 8 counts of murder. The trial is now in its 5th week and could last another month. Gosnell is accused of first-degree murder in the deaths of 7 newborns and third-degree murder in the death of one of his patients. Investigators of his Philadelphia abortion clinic described it as a, quote, house of horrors. My grasp of the English language doesn't allow me to fully describe how horrific this clinic was. Rotting bodies, fetal remains, the smell of urine throughout, bloodstained, Philadelphia District Attorney Seth Williams said during the trial, according to CNN. Below are 58 graphic details that are included in the grand jury report and other media stories about the case as it continues. And these are all cited. I'm just going to read the first 3 here. When authorities searched Gosnell's office, they found bags and bottles holding aborted fetuses scattered throughout the building. It would rain fetuses and blood all over the place, testified one unlicensed medical school graduate who worked at the clinic. Gosnell may have severed the spines of hundreds of born alive babies with scissors. This trial wasn't covered by the mainstream media, and this is in Philadelphia, not exactly a red-wing bastion or right-wing red city. I get red, right? Yeah, I got him.
Is any major city a red city?
No, not at all. No.
Well, for those that want the full thoughts on where we differ on the abortion debate, there's 2 episodes pretty close to back. The first one is, I think it's titled Abortion a debate. But the second one, we get a little bit more clear on where we stand. So you can kind of get where we are on this. And both of us are definitely very, I don't know what direction is better, north or south. I think north would be better. We're very north of where this crap is. In fact, when you're talking about the ones that were born alive, that kind of made me put, the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. So,
And
but I'm trying to figure out where we're going with this, because if you're just trying to rile me up, you did it.
well, I am actually, that is part of the point here, is to rile people up, because how many people who consider themselves pro-choice just dismissively dismissed, reflexively downplayed these incidences, if you ever heard about them at all, without ever bothering to look into them and the grotesque things that, now again, this was 2013 was the Gosnell trial, 2015 were the Planned Parenthood videos, and now we keep, as we've said before, the slippery slope can be a logical fallacy. It is not inherently and necessarily a logical fallacy. And here we are tumbling at breakneck speed down the slippery slope. Maryland proposes bill to allow abortion 28 days after birth. Now, this is a pro-life site, and it has some rather sensational views on this, and it cites some pro-life people, and they're talking about, well, okay, well,
what's the name of the bill?
let's click on the bill. It's
okay,
linked. Senate Bill 669 from Maryland. Nothing in this section shall be construed to confer personhood or any rights on the fetus. Okay. This section may not be construed to authorize any form of investigation or penalty for a person, one, terminating or attempting to terminate the person's own pregnancy, or two, experiencing a miscarriage, perinatal death related to a failure to act, or stillbirth. A person is not subject to criminal penalties or civil damages for aiding, informing, or in any way assisting a pregnant person in terminating or seeking to terminate the person's pregnancy. A person may bring a cause of action for damages if the person was subject to unlawful arrest or criminal investigation for a violation of this section as a result of, one, terminating or attempting to terminate the person's own pregnancy, two, experiencing miscarriage, stillbirth, or perinatal death, or aiding, informing, or in any way assisting a pregnant person in terminating or attempting to terminate the person's pregnancy. A couple of things. First of all, this is on its face, blanket authorization of abortion up to and including birth, which is contrary to what most people who say they're pro-choice are actually for, and is contrary to the Supreme Court decisions on abortion, the one everyone knows, Roe v. Wade, and the one that actually matters, Planned Parenthood versus Casey. So I would call this extreme. By definition, this is extreme, and yet pro-life people are the ones who are being called extreme.
Well, where in this bill does it say up to 28 days after birth?
What does perinatal mean?
But still, I'm talking about the timeline.
Yeah, that's where I'm getting at. What does perinatal mean, as opposed to prenatal? Perinatal, after birth.
Yeah, so, but that's only under the experiencing miscarriage, stillbirth, or perinatal death. Mm-hmm. It's not actually causing the death. Mm-hmm. Those were in that statement 3 natural causes.
The 28 days comes from that perinatal is not defined in this bill. In other bills, it is defined as up to 4 weeks after birth.
But that's still, I don't, in that section 2,
section
where do they specify this? Because those are 2 natural causes and then perinatal death.
Exactly.
You would assume is natural cause at that point.
You would assume, but perinatal, it is being lumped in there without definition. So any death up to 4 weeks after birth is basically given blanket immunity. And the reason I highlighted this whole section is because you can't even investigate it. So while it is not explicitly allowing abortions, a nice word for infanticide post-birth, it is effectively allowing for post-birth abortions because you can't even investigate a post-birth perinatal death without serious ramifications to the investigator. And it wouldn't even be clear if you could charge someone in a post-birth death.
Well, I don't like the ambiguity, but at the same time, I don't see how, even with this bill, if like 10 people saw a mother strangle her baby and went to the authorities.
Well, but that's the extreme case. You could just shut the door to the nursery and go out of town. You could kill from neglect, and can you be charged? It doesn't look like it on the face of this bill, but fine. It's just a one. Oh, it's not a one-off. This is from Tim Pool. Hardly a radical right winger. California is doing the same thing. It is passing a similar law with a similar loophole. Perinatal, without defining within the context of the bill, what does perinatal mean? So it is allowing for post-birth deaths without any charge.
It's allowing for concept creep is what it's allowing for.
At the least, you have here what pro-life people have been talking about for a while now, since Virginia's governor, or previous governor, came out and talked about this, because he was a doctor and he talked about this on a radio show and nobody paid attention to it. Or what I just showed with the Gosnell trial, that he was accused, not charged with, but he was accused of killing hundreds of babies that survived abortions or just birthed and then killed them. So at the very least, it seems to pretty clearly excuse that, if not outright allow for, I've had this baby for a week and it's a lot more annoying than I thought it would be, a lot more work than I thought it would be. I'm going to Cabo and I'm going to leave the baby here in the nursery. But fine, we're still talking about maybes and would nots. And oh, wait, here's the Denver Gazette. Colorado is not exactly a red state anymore. It is at best purple. And here's the Denver Gazette writing an editorial that the governor just signed into law an extreme left-wing abortion bill that is along the lines of what Maryland and California are looking at here.
Hmm. All right, going. Oh, I thought you were going to go into the main points of that. I was just looking through it.
Well, my main point is that we are rapidly becoming an evil society. Now, I have used that term and I've called individuals evil before, like Nancy Pelosi admitting that what China is doing is genocide, but we have to work with them on climate change policies. That's evil. This is evil. This is stuff that would make the those who ran the Nazi T4 program go, oh, hey, wait a minute, that's too far. And that's not an exaggeration. I brought up Goebbels' own statements about the T4 program and how he had to modify it to sell it to the German people in its new incarnation.
Well, I'm going to push back a little bit here. It's not we're becoming an evil society. It's evil people are hijacking concepts to
yes,
do bad things using normal people. And it's a matter of ignorance, not evil.
There comes a point where ignorance is willful, though.
Not necessarily, because remember the cognitive bias, the blindness that comes with tribalism.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you know about the gorilla study, right? Where the people are passing the ball, and the subjects of the study are supposed to watch the people passing the ball and count how many it is, and they increasingly make it more complicated. Well, in the middle of the study, a guy in a gorilla suit walks out, waves, and then walks through, and most people don't see the guy in the gorilla suit. The same thing happens with regular everyday concepts.
Sure. No, but
it's not that I say, ooh, this evil thing is, no, we are, because we're not necessarily red or blue. Even though you're more conservative and I'm a little bit more liberal, neither of us are Republican or Democrat at this point. We're both fed up with either
it's
side.
a mono-party system.
Yeah. So if we still identified as that, there would be this massive blind spot, you know. And realistically, people don't want to think things through.
Yeah, but
they have one or two key things that are important to them, and then everything else is whatever happens, right?
But there comes a point where you're not any different than the SS officer saying, I was just following orders. Because there comes a point where it's, well, I didn't know. Yeah, but then when you were informed of this, you didn't want to know. You didn't want to do anything about it. So there's a difference between people passing a ball around.
But like you said, there's a difference in coverage too.
And someone in a gorilla suit comes out and shoots someone.
Yeah, but there's a difference in coverage. So if you're that biased side and you're only seeing the coverage from that side, you are ignorant to the most grotesque parts of that. And then when you hear somebody from the other side present it to you, that's a biased information source coming at you, and you question that. There's a difference between questioning the information that is contrary to what you believe than actually being party to the information. Because there is a lot of, I hate to use this goddamn word because it's taken a different meaning now. There is a lot of misinformation from both sides that come as propaganda. And the pro-life movement does throw out, over exaggerate a lot of things. The pro-choice movement does over exaggerate.
Well, no, I'm going to push back on that, because there's a difference between over exaggerating or heavily emphasizing the thing you want to say versus straight up misinformation. That first CNN article was written to be misinformation. It was written to be misleading.
Mm-hmm. And okay, if CNN's your only source,
because if CNN is your only source, again, that's all. Let's take that article as an example. That's on you. It linked to both the 8-minute clip and the full video. If you couldn't be bothered to go and watch it on your own, you don't have an excuse to say, well, I didn't know these horrific things were happening.
Well, let me just burst your bubble here. 85 to 90% of the country will not go watch the full video on their own. The right-leaning sources, the right-leaning people, will watch the 8-minute video, and the left-leaning people will just read the CNN article.
Then you are the town literally on the other side of the wall of the concentration camp saying, I don't know what that smoke is. I don't know what that screams are. I didn't know anything. Bullshit. You are not absolved, certainly not morally, certainly not culturally. And there comes a point where, depending on your activity, you may not be absolved legally when you're talking about something this heinous. Like, as a specific example of what I mean by that legally is, so far as I know, Gosnell was the only one charged for all of those crimes. Unless they made plea deals for testimony, where were the charges against other people in that clinic? Where were the charges against the administrative state that is supposed to oversee clinics like that?
I wouldn't doubt there was plea deals because people are going to CYA as soon as they
Mhm.
realize they're in trouble. But yeah, when we're administering blame, this is the difficult part of the judicial system, right? There is proximity to the reality versus just knowledge from sources, right? So the people in that clinic, they had firsthand knowledge and actually were helping with that situation. That argument is separate from the person who reads a biased news article about the situation. So say someone says, I'm pro-abortion, and right and left are fighting in their state on what the laws should say, then they're going to read the articles that support Team Blue or support Team Red. And of course, both sides are going to be too far on one end of the aisle. And what if you are identified as one of the two sides, you're going to say it should be that, instead of that's a little too far for me. Maybe they should get together and compromise. No one's saying that because we have a dumbass two-party system, but
Well, 2 points on that. There is a line somewhere where the heinousness of the accusation should compel you to investigate further. Okay, we're not talking about, even something that I and a lot of people consider grotesque, late term or partial birth abortion. We're not even talking about that in the Gosnell case.
no,
It,
and that's where I also wanted to draw another line, because okay, let's separate Maryland and California and Denver, or that was Denver Gazette, Colorado.
it was a state law.
Yeah, let's separate those from the Gosnell case, because even if I was blue pro-abortion and I was supporting, at least some degree of abortion law in my state, Gosnell acted outside of the law no matter what the abortion law is.
Well, but that's my point, is dismissing the Planned Parenthood videos, ignoring the Gosnell case. That's how you get here. You don't suddenly arrive at the invasion of Poland. There were years of lead up to that. You don't suddenly arrive at Auschwitz. There were years of lead up to that. At some point along the way, someone's should have said, we need to stop this crazy train before it kills us all. That's my point with the Planned Parenthood videos and the Gosnell case, is that they didn't just stop. It wasn't just, oh, well, that's the end of that. And to that was my second point that I wanted to bring up, is that because of the Gosnell case, there were actually attempts at legitimate legislation, which was very simply abortion providers, abortion clinics would have to meet the same standards as any other outpatient clinic. So, if you go in to get the boy snipped, that's an outpatient procedure. That office has to meet certain minimum standards of medical safety. It was shocking to me that abortion providers didn't in the first place, but then you add to that the fact that they were those laws were vigorously opposed, and all or most of them were struck down by state Supreme Courts, if not the federal Supreme Court. I'm going off of memory here from nearly a decade ago, but that is what I mean by, at a certain point, you're no longer ignorant, you're acting.
No, I'm still going to push
with
back
evil
because
conduct.
I think the Gosnell case has no place in this debate.
No,
Because
it absolutely does.
No, because there wasn't a blind eye turned. He was convicted. I just looked it up. He was
Yes,
convicted.
he was convicted. What I'm talking about is that then a number of GOP lawmakers in various states, in order to prevent that from happening somewhere else, tried to pass laws that would have ostensibly prevented the Gosnell Clinic from being such a horror show, by simply saying there was no other baggage to it. There was no other extra pro-life stuff to it. It was simply an abortion provider has to meet the same standards as any other outpatient clinic.
That wasn't
And
already on the book?
that was not on the books. No. That's why they were trying to pass this law, is to say an abortion provider is not a loophole to what anyone else has to do.
I still think it's an outlier that doesn't belong in the debate, because the concept creep is different. He still broke the law, no matter what the law was, and he's being convicted for it. Now, that where it becomes the two-party debate, where it's the blind eye really comes. So we're really good unconsciously of post hoc justifying everything we do emotionally, because the elephant always leads. And the writer usually just justifies the elephant's actions, right? So if I'm pro-abortion, team blue, and that starts creeping in that direction that's too far from me, fear is still the number one. So say abortion is my number one issue. We're gonna just assume that it's not in real life, but it's one I wish we can just put to bed. But in this hypothetical, abortion is my number one issue. My body, my choice. Scream whatever mantra you want. And it is, the original 90s where it was, first trimester, at least it's legal, right? And that's where I stood, but then it crept to second trimester, and then it crept. But on the other end, you have the people that want to take it away from you. And the propaganda machine in Team Blue is so good at making you fear the other side that wants to take it away from you, that you are blind to the creep. And your justification when you bring in that outlier case is, oh, but he broke the law. That's not where we're going with this. That's never where we're going to go with this. We're going to keep it within these parameters. And it's a little bit more than I want, but it's still better than the guys trying to take it away from me. And so fear is the number one emotion we have as human beings. It is the most powerful emotion we have as human beings. And the propaganda machine on both sides, and this is media and politicians, are so good at getting you to fear what the other side wants to do, that you will allow that creep to go with a completely blind eye and then post hoc justify your emotion. It's kind of basic brain chemistry. This is the way it works. And this is the way our system has become. How many people voted for Biden because they love Biden and thought he was actually going to fix things? No, they voted for Biden because they hate and fear what Trump was going to do.
That's actually exit poll data. Yeah.
They were so afraid of this fascist state that Team Blue was propagandizing for 4 years, that never actually happened and didn't look like it was going to happen, that they voted for somebody that we can list X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, all the way through the alphabet problems. We're going there. But there was blindness to it. Even some of the biggest public intellectuals are still post hoc justifying their love for Biden as president, even though they're basically saying things that are untrue. And I don't think they're lying. I think they just are completely blind because this decision was so important. And on the other side of it was Trump. How many Trumpers voted the way they did because of Antifa, because of BLM's actions, because of, the fear of communism taking over the United States, the fear of China. We're going to fight China. We've got a strong leader in Trump. Remember the bias of understanding yourself or your own motives versus understanding others. Your justification system is so powerful that it will shut off other information. That's where the two sides come in. So that creep going further than you want it to go is allowable because you're so afraid of the other side. No, then just name your issue on it. No, we're talking abortion, but name your issue. Gun control, abortion, communism versus capitalism, or socialism versus capitalism.
But everything you're saying is a reason, not an excuse.
Well, I think people could get better at making better decisions. And I think
Sure.
part of it is starting to try to cognitively push yourself away from the triad. But at the same time, if you're in it and your only access is certain outlets because you're on that side, you're never going to get out of it. You got to blame the people that know what they're doing, not the mass. Again, if everybody was a leader, we would be at war 100% of the time.
Let me move on to the next point, which
I don't disagree that things have gone too far in places. What I do disagree with is people's role in it and how and where to place the blame.
if we're talking historical fact, fine. But if we're talking current moment, no, wake the F up. When people are talking about the don't say gay bill, have you read the damn bill? When people are calling people who are opposed to this bill groomers, are you gonna laugh and mock and make a meme, or are you gonna read the damn bill?
You're going to make a meme if you're 80% of the country.
Exactly.
Or no, you're not even going to make a meme. You're going to share a meme. There's a difference. The person who made the meme is responsible.
When you see a headline talking about leaked Disney board meeting showing LGBTQ agenda and groomers, are you going to ignore it as Bible thumping Christian propaganda, or are you going to click on the damn link? So this is Red State, and I'm not going to go off of their article because it is, they don't even pretend to be a news site. They're an editorial site, but they have all of the links. They have all of the leaked videos. You can watch them for your own darn self. I will go to a Washington Times article which talks about some of these, which includes things like Vivian Ware, Disney Diversity and Inclusion Manager, talking about how the company began eliminating gendered greetings last year at the Magic Kingdom, such as ladies and gentlemen and boys and girls, replacing them with phrases such as hello friends. All right, well, maybe that's just woke nonsense, but oh, wait, let's keep reading. Down we go. Where was it? The Disney virtual meeting included Carrie Burke, president of Disney General Entertainment Content, who said she was shocked when an employee pointed out at a March 20 open forum that we only have a handful of queer leads in our content. We have many, many LGBTQIA characters in our stories, and yet we don't have enough leads and narratives in which gay characters just get to be characters and not have to be about gay stories, said Miss Burke. And so that's been very eye-opening for me. And I can tell you it's something that I feel perhaps had this moment not happened, I as a leader and me and my colleagues would not have focused on, and going forward, I certainly will be so. Latoya Revenue, Disney television executive producer, said she was surprised how super welcoming the company was to my, quote, my not at all secret gay agenda. It goes on, and one of the other key takeaways from this meeting was that there is going to be a push to have 50% or more of their characters in the near future be part of the rainbow spectrum. These are kids shows. This is a primarily kid-focused company with a focus on an avowed, self-proclaimed agenda. What is that if not grooming? Last time
Well,
we talked about this, I showed a YouTube video that was straight up kiddie porn, animated, but still straight up kiddie porn. I went down a dark rabbit hole, and they have worse than what I showed, and they're on YouTube.
the pushback I'm going to give now is not any disagreement to how bad this situation is. It's the fact that it is actually costing them. You talk about wake up masses. The masses have actually woken up to some degree, and it's getting to be more and more and more every day with regards to Disney, to things like Netflix. What was it? CNN Plus shut off after a
In this
month.
regard, it is a bright spot and an element of hope compared to my previous ranting about, pro-abortion, ignoring baby murder because it works for your politics. That
Now
is
remember,
true.
there's also a point in this movement too, and specifically to this movement. I guess we could say it along the lines of BLM too, but let's stay on topic with the LGBTQI plus or whatever it is these days. Is there was a tipping point where the Trojan horse was exposed.
Mhm.
So for the longest time, there was this nice Trojan horse of being polite, of not, just not judging people, of, if someone happens to have this tendency, including them into the mix of your life, and being accepting of it, or whatever. But then there was that tipping point. Unfortunately, the tipping point was too late. They were already injected into the school system so deep that once the parents were aware of it, it's almost like extracting a tumor at this point. But yeah, they reached the tipping point where that just being nice no longer covers what they're doing, because this not at all secret agenda is not about being nice.
There's something that the Red State article, the author of that, mentioned that lends to that point is, if what this is all about by your previous statements and propaganda, it's supposedly all about inclusion. That's the big buzzword, diversity and inclusion. Okay, then how the heck can you justify having over 50% of your characters on this rainbow spectrum when in the population there's only a small minority? But then to that point, again, this is where it is propaganda and it is grooming.
Well,
Let's go.
we used to be in that Mott and Bailey argument situation just 2 years ago. When we started this podcast a year and a half, 2 years ago, we were talking about things like the Mott and Bailey argument with these activist movements. The problem for them is they've extended the Bailey so far out they can't even get back to the Mott anymore when they get attacked. So it used to be you stay in the safe zone, which is the Mott, which in this discussion would be the acceptance, would be the not making fun of people, not bullying people. We all agree that that's bad, right?
Mhm.
So that's their safe spot. And then they extend one thing out. Let's put more characters into this. Oh, jump back to the Mott when people have a problem with it. And now people are attacking the Mott, which is something good, and they seem like bad people. And so then they extended it out. Well, now we need to include a little bit more sex talk to younger kids. Well, that was a little bit further out. Parents got mad. They jumped back, and it kind of protected them for a little bit. And now it's, I need to talk about my sex life to
Yeah.
these children. And that was too far out. They can't get back. They could not withstand the attack and get back to the Mott, because that's not about being polite. You're talking about your sex life. Teachers with anal pig decorations on their desk that show anal sex, and it has a money thing in it you can drop money into, like a piggy bank that you put pencils in its butt. That was too far out, and parents got aware of that and they couldn't get back. Oh, it's just being polite. No, it's not just being polite. You showed my 8-year-old anal sex.
And this is my last link here to that point. It matters. It has an effect. This is a Gallup poll from came out about a month or so back. It was sampled over it was done during 2021, and they broke down sexuality by generation. All right, so you might say, well, the traditionalists, they were all a bunch of repressed Bible thumpers. All right, well, fine, let's ignore that. But the baby boomers, these are people who came of age during the sexual revolution, and they only identified as 2.6% LGBT. All right, well, yeah, but they were parroted by those Bible thumping repressed homosexuals. All right, well, fine. Gen Xers were raised by the baby boomers, raised by the people who came of age during the sexual revolution. They were only 4.2%. So not quite double, still a very small amount. Now all of a sudden you get to millennials and it jumps up to 10.5%. And then you get to Gen Z and it doubles to 20.8%. Do you really think that's a real number? Or do you think these are young, impressionable people being influenced by this not so secret gay agenda? And this matters. This isn't, you're afraid of the gays. No, I'm afraid of hurting. I'm afraid and I'm incensed at hurting children. If you assume that traditionally, historically, logically, the homosexual, the LGBT community probably shouldn't be more than like 3 to 5%, just logically and historically. That's just how a bell curve works. That's just how propagation of the species works. So you have perhaps 15% of young people now being, there you go. You have about 15% of these self-identifying people now are going to grow up to realize at some point, this isn't me. And then what damage have they done to themselves psychologically, emotionally, sexually, perhaps physically, in order to fit into this lane that they naturally don't belong in, but they have been pressured into? What kind of harm are you doing to children? And we're talking about sex and sexuality. This is grooming, definitionally.
I didn't know we were going into grooming today, so I would have had ready the stages of sexual. But they're at least before the APA went woke, there was stages of.
Yeah, we can get into that more next time. My bigger point here, and this is why I started with abortion, is this isn't treating children like children. This is treating children like objects for your own desires, for your own political goals.
Well, it's this, go back to Daniel Schmachtenberger, it's this subclinical narcissism, right? And we are creating, with social media and just our approach to raising children, and realistically ourselves, because it can hit you at any age depending on how you get immersed into it. He used subclinical mental illness, but one of the major ones was narcissism. Look at me, and if you don't like me, then that's how I judge myself. Versus, I have my own inner self-esteem, and I'm going to try to do good things that are pro-social, but if you don't like me, okay, I move on to the next. So now it's like, I brought up this commercial before where the kid puts his phone on his bike facing his face. Yep. And he's riding around town and it says, "I look good today. I look good today." And the little likes are coming up on his TikTok or Instagram or whatever he had up, something where he's doing a live show where he's just riding his bike with his face on the camera. And that same kid had no likes come through, that would have crushed their day to the nth degree, right? Or even not enough likes came through, not as many as last time, or not their best total time. And that's kind of the generation we're raising right now. And so there's several kind of fingers that come off of that. Is one of them is, how do you get attention these days? How do you stand out? Who is celebrated right now? Well, Disney tells us who's celebrated, right? The media tells us who's celebrated. The likes on social media is skewed to the minorities, right? Because they are pushed forward on the algorithms. So who gets the most likes? That non-binary trans individual. So of that 20.6%, who's just trying to be liked? And so we've raised a generation of kids that need that more than their own personal self-esteem. There was another direction I was going with that, and then I thought of the likes.
Well, to that point, another thing I didn't want to bring up video of because it's really gross, along with those creepy animated ones, is how many shows have there been or are there now or are coming out about trans kids? And you don't think that influences other kids? One of you see that ballooning of that number in that Gallup poll, and you don't think there's pressure, there's outside influence, there's narcissism and self-esteem issues there that are leading kids to say, I want to be like that, one. And then two, this isn't grooming and objectifying. If you see one of these cross-dressing trans kids doing a drag show, Drag Kids, I think is the name of one of these that I was going to bring up a video of, and I said, no, this is gross, because you have a young boy, a prepubescent or barely pubescent boy, dressing in sexual ways as a girl and then doing this drag show. What the hell would you think if that was actually a girl? If that was a 12-year-old girl dressing like that, acting like that, doing these quasi strip teases for these drag shows?
Look at the backlash on cuties. That tells you what the reaction would be.
Exactly.
But then let's take this back to the classroom. Man, I wish it wasn't so deep into this episode that we're actually getting onto something big here. But go back to the classroom. Where are the three big, or I'll say two big, but one of them is broken up into two big kind of developers of self-esteem at a young age. So kids inherently are trying to develop their self-esteem, and they're doing it through socializing, right? You don't sit in your room alone and develop self-esteem. And one of them is their peers. So how do I get along? How social am I with my peers? We're all getting along. I've got good friends. We agree, we disagree, but then we're still friends. That develops self-esteem. That's one. But then it's authority figures. And that's broken up into parents and teachers at that age. So if I'm looking for approval, that teacher's approval is going to shape me, especially in that prepubescent time frame, is going to shape me more than everything else in the world, except for possibly peers and parents. And depending on what parents know and how involved they are, that teacher may be number one. That teacher may be the number one authority person in their life. So if teacher gives more attention to the person who says, oh yeah, I think I'm non-binary too, just like you, teacher, and they start giving more attention to those students, guess what? People are going to join the ranks. And you do that at a young age, you will have this dichotomy in your brain that says, I am this, even if you don't feel that way. And now you're setting up for all kind of mental illness there. But the other part is that the attention, you brought up using people. And this is I've had a lot of beef with this lately, and I wanted to put it into one of our episodes. I didn't know how till just now. But one of I'm going to crush the right here and then go to the one with TikTok. People are celebrating this. Texas sends illegal immigrants to Washington, and Florida sends illegal immigrants to Delaware. That's horrible. I can't believe so many people are celebrating this, because it's politicians using human beings as props for votes.
Yeah. They
don't care what happens to these people when they get to Washington, when they get to Delaware. Yeah. We should be trying to fix the border crisis, but with the people who are already here that we can't get rid of, the right answer was, let's help these people integrate and let them know who's the one helping them. That's how you generate your more votes, by actually helping the people, not using them as a prop. So let's get to TikTok and narcissism. You can't show your boobies on TikTok unless you grab your little baby and you start talking about breastfeeding. And I don't know how it got in my algorithm, but I keep flipping, and every fifth one is a chick trying to be like, you can't stop me from breastfeeding in front of everybody. I agree with breastfeeding. It's the best thing you can do for your baby. I don't care if you do it in public, but you can see it. It's, you can't stop me from showing my boob because look, my baby's right here.
Can't
You
stop
said-
me from showing my ass when I got to drop a deuce in the public park.
And those 100K likes on that video, you think they're for breastfeeding awareness? No, it's because some creepy old dude is like, ooh, booby. No,
Yeah.
it's pissing me off because they're using their baby as a prop to do what they want to do because they were told they couldn't do it.
Well, that's a probably a good place to wrap this up, because you said something that I wish I would have thought of. I'm annoyed I didn't. That is kind of my closing thought on all of this, is just imagine, how do you think the reaction to cuties would have been if instead of a bunch of 10 to 12-year-old girls, it had been a bunch of 10 to 12-year-old trans boys? And
It would have been strong, but then the counter reaction would have been transphobe.
That and that is the point we are being pushed to. And it is not any less, it wouldn't be any less damaging to the kids than the actual movie was to those young girls. It wouldn't be any less damaging, or to young girls who saw that and are influenced by that. It wouldn't be any less damaging, but because it checks a particular box and fits a particular agenda, all of a sudden it becomes different. No. And I think, and next time let's tease that, let's get into the brain development and really what this is doing to kids and how impressionable they are. And you can go into the witchcraft of that, of, we all kind of know intuitively and from our own experiences that kids are impressionable, but the more we learn about the biochemistry of it, the more we can kind of quantify that.
Hold on, can you hear me?
Yeah.
My screen keeps telling me that I'm not plugged in.
Well,
I guess it
on
was
my end, it says you're recording.
Okay.
And I can still hear you, but that's I'll end my old man ranting there.
Well,
and hopefully that all made sense from my point of view.
I guess we'll close it out because you started this whole thing with remember the day and age when, bullies and the Look, let's look back when. Remember, I'm going to go back in time. Remember the day and age when we were super concerned about the downstream effects of child abuse, specifically sexual abuse, and how that affects people as adults in even the most subtle ways that make it hard to cope, but mostly in not so subtle ways. There was a day and age when that concerned us. And that the sexual abuse wasn't always kiddie porn or something insane. It was just someone exposing themselves to a child that wasn't the right age, or talking a certain way to a young child, or showing them sexual material at the wrong age. And it had downstream effects. And those, we used to call that sexual abuse from a parent or an uncle or a family friend, or the common places you actually get sexual abuse. And we used to consider it a bad thing. But now, like you've brought up imagine if it was the young boys and the transphobe thing. Now we added another movement to it that was Trojan horse as politeness, and people can't get out of that mode that it is about that first thing. No, child abuse is child abuse. it doesn't matter what other cause is attached to it. Kids have developmental ages and there's downstream effects of it. And when we add the other movement to them, we don't know what those downstream effects are. Well, you brought up one right there because you can't deny those numbers. That curve goes like this. But yeah, I guess we'll get into that deeper, because there used to be a day and age when we called exposing young children to sexuality too early was abuse, and you would lose your child or you would go to jail for
Yeah.
that.
And now we've created a loophole.
And now we're talking about mental illness from a different perspective too. It's not what caused it, how can we help it? It's, you need to be more understanding of this person. Well, we're creating the mental illness in lots of ways. Social media, these movements, lockdowns, masks on 2-year-olds in New York. Sorry, can't let that one go. And it's just going to keep going. And unless we get to how did it happen and what can we do about it, like we used to do, and instead of, you should just accept this person is the way they are, you don't understand. Well, I would love to understand, because then I could help them. And that's, I guess, where we'll close out. That's where I'll.
Well, I'm going to go, it's leg day, so I'm going to go lift heavy things and try and work out some of my anger and aggression on that.
I did my chest rehab today. Actually got a good little pump, and I did this whole interview standing up. So we're not relaxing today.
All right. Well, y'all go be healthier, and we will talk more, and hopefully we'll try and do some Wheel of Time, some fun stuff next time.
Yeah, we got to break these up with the fun one. And next time we talk other stuff, I want to talk BJ Penn is running for governor in Hawaii, because it was a pretty fun little interview with him and Rogan. Well, a lot of MMA stuff, which was fun. It was about 30 minutes of his governor stuff, and then an hour and a half of MMA.
I'll have to check that out then.
So, all right, guys, we'll see you next time.